Thank you, Sodexo. Yay. But also, like, this is like the meeting. I feel like it's the meeting. I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure that we've been working all year, actually much longer, which Dave will speak to. And this is like where we get to celebrate and kind of find out what this is actually gonna look like actualized. This is what teachers really care about, right? At the end of the day, is what is this gonna look like for me in my classroom and for me and my students? And so this is what the next hour and a half is about. But before we get started, we're gonna do a quick inclusion activity just to get us grounded. At your tables, you have anywhere from 3 to 4 members. Just take a moment to share with your table mates something you've learned this year about assessment, grading, and or reporting. And then once everyone has had a chance to share, is there any common themes in the sharing? It'll take about 3 minutes. So I think we can definitely say there's been a lot of learning, not just this year. I mean, I can speak for 3 years. And sometimes in that learning, it's been a little uncomfortable, and there's tension, right? There's philosophical tension in your own brain. There's team tension because different teammates are coming from different perspectives. Sometimes there's tension with admin. We're coming in from a different view than maybe you are. But through that I call it like progressive struggle, I hope we can come to the end of today and really celebrate the amount of learning and work that's been done over the last few years. So just for specifics for today, the goals for today's meeting are, we're gonna do a little bit of a quick journey of where we've been around our pilot in standards-based learning. A big bulk of our day is really previewing the Schoology Mastery Gradebook. And then we're going to, through that, introduce just briefly some of the new assessment and grading guidelines for next year, but more of that will to come in the fall training. All of you have the documents that were shared in the weekly if you want to dig in. But before we get to that, I want to pass the mic over to Dave, because Dave's also excited. Like, this is his last ERD day, but maybe not excited, because we know it's Dave and there's going to be some sadness in that. But Dave now has been here for 6 years and has a really nice historical lens of where the school, how the high school has actually shifted. So we want to give him a chance just to celebrate and say thank you.
Thank you. You know, I wanted to take a minute to just think about, for all of you that have been here at least 8 years, raise your hands. Okay. Everyone else, you've come in midstream through some of this change. So the process in the high school started 8 years ago when looking at removing zeros, percentages, giving extra credit for bringing tissue boxes, you know, and trying to figure out what do you do, like how do you really assess students? For years I've been sitting with Ken O'Connor and getting mad at him at conferences, and I'm like, Ken, what is professional? What does it mean? What does professional judgment mean? How do you do it? And then he would get mad at things that I would say, and so for years I've been going back and forth with Ken O'Connor. But it's important, the things that he brought forward, because it helped us think about the way we assess and provide feedback to students differently. So over this 8-year journey, we had the gradebook committee, or the report card committee that did some amazing work for a number of years, and then we collapsed that, and that work went into 3 different committees. And then it's moved us along. And so even during one of the most challenging times in education, probably the most, definitely in our time with COVID, as a school, we continued to move forward. And that was important. And so when you think of high schools and moving to a standards-based approach, it's hard. And many schools have tried, many, they abandon it along the way because it's challenging. Because you're looking at multiple courses, 300 different courses, multiple teams, people are teaching all these different areas, and so you're taking each individual course and trying to write to make sure you're doing it correctly, and that at the end of the day, that we can identify what students know and what they can do. And that's what it really comes down to. And I feel like with all the work that everybody's been doing, we're getting there. And the work of this year was really important, but all the work before was critical. And so, yes, we're in a really important place today, but I do want to say that it's been an 8-year journey and moving along the way. And and again, people that are new during those 8 years, during the hiring process, we talked about your assessment system and what you believe in education, because that was important. And so we have like-minded people in the room, but it doesn't make the work any easier. So I wanted to pause for a minute and appreciate the work of the people before us as we're also moving forward, which is important. So, and then the next thing is I wanted to thank Faye and her team, because Faye, her team, and the teacher leaders, there's so much work that goes behind the scenes to just keep things moving. During COVID, it would have been so much easier to just call it a day. And instead, we kept things moving down the road. Otherwise, it would have been another 2 years from now, another 3 years from now. And instead, we're in a place where I feel like we can move forward with our reporting systems in a really positive way, but we can also focus on some different areas as well moving forward in the school, so which is exciting. But Faye, you want to say a few things? Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. As I think about just listening to Dave and just listening about the last 8 years, and I came in with Carrie, so 3 years ago, and we came in the middle of COVID. We started in quarantine, and we grafted into some amazing work because the report card committee had left behind a series of recommendations. Some of those people had then moved on. We think back to Teresa Peabody and to Keith Stanulis, 3 minutes to understand, those of you who were here 3 years ago. I think we now operate only in 3 minutes. And I think about the fact that we never started anything from scratch. We grafted everything into the people who came before. And that's really important because each year, with new people coming in each year, we've always grafted into the work of the year before. And you spoke about foundations there, Dave, right? So the foundations of the work that we're engaged in now have been set by those preceding groups. And we're so lucky to have had this many people. We never had trouble finding people for a committee. People step up and they come and join us, and it makes us stronger than ever before. And I'm excited to also be able to say that the Inquiry Committee's work will come to you in the next 2 weeks, I think, so that you can see the results of what they've been working on. But when we think about a high school moving to standards-based teaching and learning, very few high schools are able to do it. I don't know of one that's moved from a school that adopts external standards as we've done, rather than coming from a framework like the IB or a national system. To be able to do that requires extra work, and it takes time. So in my 3rd year, knowing that I couldn't have done the work, the place that we're in now, depending on the report card committee that came before that 8 years is allowing us to do what we can do now. And I would like to say, I don't think that we could have done this work, the curriculum office could not have done any of this without the support of the faculty, but also without the support of the leadership team. So Dave and Brent Braco, for those of you who were here when Brent Braco was here, and Lauren Fine, they sheltered time for us to do it. Dave was the first principal who stood up and said, I will put the faculty collab time towards supporting this work and towards supporting my faculty. Because if I cannot support my faculty in the work we need to do, I can't see it being done. So I really want to say thank you so much. And to Carrie, who's just been an absolute pillar of strength, Carrie. Sorry, I would hug you, but you're too far away. In just helping us shelter all this time. And I'll say also, because Don actually happens to be here, executive leadership has supported us in this because they were the ones who allowed us to separate the ERDs. When other schools look at the calendar we have, and they say, what are these green triangles? And we explain what they are. They are amazed at the fact that we've been able to shelter that time. That did not come from me. That was a project that was brought forward that was then supported by Ron and Don, who allowed us to stop the school day halfway through. I think the first time we started it was 3, and then it went to an extra day each year. And it's this that has enabled us to move further forward. Above all though, I think, again, we could not be in the place we're in today if it wasn't for each and every one of you in this room who comes to meetings able to put your best foot forward and say, well, I'm not quite sure I understand exactly what's happening here, but I'm willing to engage in the dialogue. And I think that's what I have found so rich about this school, that in those meetings, in all the meetings we've been in, people bring their past experiences and are willing to make new experiences with the new teams that you're on. So congratulations to you all. We're in a great place. I'm excited to see what we do today. And to hand back to Carrie and, no, Carrie.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you. If you have questions today, there is a link where you can submit questions, and if you have your computer, you can actually see the questions that other people are submitting, and if you like them, then you can push like, and then we will monitor those questions throughout and address questions that are kind of big picture. The smaller, more micro questions that are maybe more related to departments will be with your department teams this afternoon. So one of the pieces that's been really important as we've made this shift is the voice of teachers and the voice of kids. Right? If we're going to make a shift to standards-based, we need teacher buy-in, and we need students to understand that this is actually better for their learning. So we have been piloting standards-based for at least my 3 years that I've been here. We started it, if you remember, who was on the initial 3-year pilot 3 years ago? Put up your hand. Got Kevin and Leo. Betsy was in there. We had some, who? Meredith, thank you. Dee, Catherine, Melissa, so people that aren't with us anymore. And that pilot 3 years ago really started with looking at the Mastery gradebook in Schoology to see if that was the gradebook that we wanted to use. And we quickly determined that it wasn't. And we're very thankful that Schoology has now come out with a proper standards-based gradebook, which we're going to learn today. But we had a lot of meetings those 3 years with Teresa and Hamlet. And we collected feedback from teachers and students along the way. So we hope that what we're going to present today honors that feedback. And at the end of the day, it's about the kids. So we'd like to show a video. Thank you, Daniel Budd, for putting this lovely video together. He interviewed 3 kids or 4? 3 students that have been part of the pilots over the last 3 years. And they speak to the pilot as mastery. They don't call it standards-based. And actually, the parents actually like the word mastery too, so it might be just something that we end up with. That the parent advisory group, standards-based sounds so formal and standard. Mastery sounds much more glamorous, was their feedback. So the kids use the word mastery because that is the word they actually see in the gradebook. But Daniel just went to these 3 kids. There was no prep. They spoke impromptu about their experiences in a standards-based system over the last 3 years, and this is what they have to say.
Hello, my name is Annalise Mack.
Hi, I'm Alan.
I'm Keely. I am currently in grade 11. I think that in terms of how the transition has been, in all of my previous humanities classes, we've actually been assessing pretty much standard-based for a while. And so I didn't find the transition too difficult because I was pretty used to the system already. I think, well, honestly, the transition has been pretty smooth in my opinion. I think one thing that might have been a little bit confusing or hard was definitely when Mastery started. I didn't know where to find it on Schoology.
So the transition to standards-based grading makes it very clear what skills and subjects I need to work on and kind of what I need to focus most of my attention on to get the grade in that particular mastery up and get better at it, which I think is, you can't really see it in regular reading.
Now with Mastery, it's definitely helped me a lot in terms of improving my individual skills. Because of Mastery, it points out each individual skill set that you can improve on. That way I can focus on those individual skills versus having to maybe do the entire thing again.
Very useful in helping understand and specify specific skills to work on.
You can say, oh, it's not that I don't understand what's going on in my English language class. It's that maybe I need to improve on my writing style. And just having that specific feedback enables you to not only feel more confident about yourself as a learner, because you can see that you do very well in different parts of the subject, but you also get to correctly identify what needs to be improved, and so studying is so much more effective because of it.
You can really tell what skills that you're going to be learning in a course and what you're going to be asked to do. For example, even before the test, I know what I'm going to be doing in this assessment.
Do you think that talking to your teachers have also been improved in terms of the communication between students and teachers? Mastery has also improved that because those individual skill sets, now when students go to ask their teachers questions, instead of asking them vaguely, oh, how did I do on my test? Or how do you think I did? They can ask them those individual questions and the conversation becomes more direct towards something that can help the student improve and more specific in what certain skill they can improve. I know a lot of the times at our school, a lot of students prioritize their grades and they only want the good results. But I think with Mastery, I think it's actually the opposite of that. Well, because you can see those skills, they're looking more into the skills that they can improve on. Personally, when I use the Mastery, I don't look at it as a way to up my results so I can get a perfect score. I look at it as a way that this is something I need to improve on for the future. And this is something that I can specifically hone in on and maybe something I'm not as strong at, but because I have that mastery and I have those specifics, I can talk to my teachers about it, and it's less results oriented, but it's more personally oriented. When you go to teachers, you can ask how you can improve a specific skill, and not only does that save you time when you are studying, but you can also come up with various different studying methods for that specific skill, which can be more creative and also more effective for the individual learner. But I think that one of the things which makes standard-based grading so great is that you can assess the same skill throughout the year. So you can see how you were at the beginning, and as time goes on, how you can improve. And it gives you a lot of different chances to get better that you can track.
So these are just 3 of our kids, but I can say that the feedback from the last 3 years is consistent with what these kids are saying, and where it wasn't consistent, the team that was in the pilot addressed that and looked for ways to address their feedback. So we're just gonna take a moment because man, those kids had a lot of amazing feedback for us. If you could open up menti.com on your phone or your computer if you have it. This is a great little instructional tool that we can model at the same time. You're gonna enter this code, and we'd love for you to put in what are the words or phrases you heard those 3 kids saying. What word resonated with you? And you can see people's responses up on the screen. If we're doing standards-based assessment, grading, and reporting right, and I'm not saying we're going to get it right the first time, right? This is going to be it's going to be growth. We're going to be learning. But if we're doing it right and we're listening to kids, this kind of feedback system is personalized for students. It allows them to understand where they are, where they need to go, and how to get there in very specific ways. The conversation starts to change. Isn't this what we want as teachers? We know our kids, right? How can I get the A, Miss Stevens? How can I get the A, Mr. Lee? And you heard Keely speak. It shifts the conversation to not how I get the A, but I notice that my reading skills are weaker than my writing, so help me become a better reader. Help me become a better modeler in science. The conversations start changing. And kids start to see that it's about growth. Our kids will always be about the grade, of course. This is who they are. They're academically driven. But the kids have told us consistently, Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Zen, Hamlet, Teresa, the conversations are shifting in my classroom, and I like this because it's more specific. And I'm no longer not good at math. Maybe I just understand that as a math student, I'm struggling with computations. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. So I hope that that video encourages you as teachers, because I know we're going in with a bit of trepidation, especially if you weren't part of the pilot, that this feels new, but the kids are on your side. They want this, they see the benefits for their learning. Okay? Is there any questions that we need to address at this point yet? No? Okay. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Sarah. And Sarah's going to take us through a very high-level overview of what, oh, sorry, before we do that, participant warning. This is a sit and get session. We didn't have any other way to do this, but do know that after this session, Daniel has been a machine in the background creating individual tutorials on all parts of Schoology. So, and on video, 20 different tutorials that walk you through everything you need to know. You do not need to look at that this year. It's going to be part of fall training, but if you feel that you want to get into Schoology and understand it at more of a micro level, we have those. He's also going to talk at the end of the session about some live meetings to take you through the actual gradebook. The good news is there's a part at 3:30. The two documents that support what you're going to hear today are the updated Schoology guidelines that were shared in the weekly. Huge thank you to the teachers that were in the pilot that gave feedback on this. Their feedback was pivotal, and also to the teacher leaders of middle school, high school. And secondly, we had to go through all of our policy documents, reassessment, handing in late work, all these pieces to make sure they aligned with a standards-based practice. That's the second document we shared in the weekly. Again, a huge thank you. Middle school, high school wrote these together. Teacher leaders in middle school, high school reviewed, gave feedback. It was a very iterative, collaborative process. So we hope that you feel that the student policies are supportive of the work you're going to be doing in the classroom. Again, more to come on those in fall training, but they're there if you want to dig into them. Anything else, Sarah? Okay. All right. So what will Schoology look like for you as a teacher? What are you going to have to do maybe a little bit differently? And how are kids going to interface with the feedback you're giving them? So they'll hand it off to Sarah.
All right, so if you remember back to October, like 7 months ago, our first meeting together and introduction to each other was about Schoology, and a lot has happened in those 7 months. But I'm really excited and super grateful again, particularly to Carrie and Alistair and the teacher leaders for all of the feedback, as well as AP Lang, in putting this presentation together and the guidelines, because I think it's hopefully really supportive of kids. I can't promise you today that I have an answer to every question that you have, but I will do my best to give you an overview of the information, and if we don't have the answer today, we will seek to get the answer for you. Okay? So next year, when you open Schoology, you're going to see a new tab in Schoology, and it's called Mastery, and that is going to take you into the new gradebook. You'll see there that there's still above it, I know it's hard to see from far away, a small tab called Gradebook. That's going to exist there, and we'll talk about how that's used later today. But primarily where students will see their learning next year is going to be in what Schoology simply calls Mastery. And when you open Mastery as a teacher, what you're going to see for your class is here are the reporting categories, and here's how my students are doing. And you're going to see it represented graphically with color. And there's going to be 4 colors. And essentially you get an immediate overview of here's how my students are doing in each of my reporting categories. So if I'm a humanities teacher, I immediately see how are my kids doing in reading, writing, language, social studies skills, and social studies concepts. It's all there for you pictorially. So I think that's really exciting. You can go into the reporting category and dig deeper, and it's going to then show you within this reporting category, here's the measurement topics, and here's how kids are doing in each of those measurement topics. And again, what I really like about this is that it's color coordinated, so that I can very easily get an overview of how all of my students are doing in relation to the measurement topic. And that's how you're going to put grades into your grade book next year, is going to be at the measurement topic level. So when you think about your rubrics, when you think about how you're assessing kids, how you're structuring your assessments, it's at your measurement topic level that you're going to be putting grades into the grade book next year. Okay. In addition to just the quick graphical overview, you can also click and see further detail to see what students are developing. Carrie, we're gonna keep working on your skills, and you can see what students are at exhibiting as well. And it will also show you exhibiting depth, and it's going to show you emerging. So again, it's graphic and colorful.
Sarah, I shared the slides with everybody, so if this is too small for you, you can follow along the
Great,
slides.
perfect, thank you. Email, did you put them in?
I put it, shared it as a shared Google Doc.
Okay. In an email, they're asking, did it, okay, so yes, an email. All right, in addition to being able to see how students doing at the reporting category level, I can click down and see how our students doing in this measurement topic. So I can again get that same graphical overview for the measurement topic. And then at the bottom, I'm gonna see all of the assignments within that measurement topic that I've given up to this point so far. All right, so this is kind of your primary grid and overview of what you're going to typically view when you want to look at student progress, and that's how you drill down into it. I can also look and see how is a student individually doing. And so, for example, you can see that our student Dave here is in each of the reporting categories. Dave is exhibiting, right? And so this, you can see what this looks like. This is what a student's going to see, all right? You can also go into this view, but it's got each reporting category, and then you can see how the student is doing. In Schoology, our idea of measurement topic is called a learning objective as well. So you're gonna hear that term begin to be used interchangeably. Cannot change it in Schoology, but anytime I'm talking about wanting to dig in further to a student, I'm looking at the learning objective. And so I can click on any one of those reporting categories that I had for Dave, and I can then see how the student's doing in each of the measurement topics, and it will also tell me how many assignments that the student has for each of those measurement topics. So each submission is an assignment that a student has turned in that's counting towards the grade book. And then finally, I can click down into that measurement topic, and I can see how has this student done on each assessment. This is going to be a really helpful view for you as teacher as well as the student, because when I'm thinking about a student and I'm thinking about that student's learning progression and how they've progressed in their learning and grown over the course of the semester, this is going to be one way that you can view that. You just see the assignments lined up, here they're aligned sequentially, and see how is the student growing over the course of the semester. All right, so that's kind of the overview of this is what Schoology Mastery looks like. This is how I'm going to be able to visualize my student learning for next year. The next level is about how do I actually put my assessments into Schoology, because there's some new changes that we're going to have to be aware of as we consider how we mark student learning in the gradebook next year and whether or not it counts towards the student's overall proficiency level or whether it's just formative work. So you're going to see next year that there's a folder called Evidence of Learning, and this is any piece of student work that occurs. In standards-based, it's the philosophy that everything is evidence of learning, right? I'm always checking to see how is my student doing, and so it's any task is essentially evidence of student learning. One of the shifts that you're going to see next year is that how we use formative work may be different from how you've been using it in the past. Because as I've engaged in discussions around the middle and high school, one of the things is, well, formative cannot go in the gradebook and summative has to go in the gradebook. And formative are these small tasks, but summative, these are these big unit-long tests. We're going to begin to reframe that for next year. Because again, it's all evidence of student learning. So formative assessments I'm using to guide instruction along the way. And formative work can go towards a student's proficiency level. It can go into the grade book next year. but it also can just be used formatively. So you're going to have a couple of options there. And then summative work is that end of unit, end of semester, cumulative learning that also is going to go into the grade book. Okay, so again, I know that for some of us, we've been learned, oh, formative work is only practice. It could be that that formative work is still valid evidence of student learning and it can go into the grade book. So that's a shift for some teachers I know. So if you want to think about it graphically, essentially next year, everything's evidence of learning. My formative work, I have two choices. Either it doesn't contribute to the grade book, to the overall proficiency level, or it does contribute to the overall proficiency level. And then summative work is assumed that it's going to contribute to that student's proficiency level in the course.
Can that be individualized for students? So, in other words, if I have a student that's extended absent due to illness, the potential of turning a formative for this student into counting towards their proficiency.
Yes, definitely. And there may be some students for whom I'm going to omit some of their earlier learning using my professional best judgment, because over the course of the semester they've grown. And so yes, you have a lot more control over what is calculating into an individual student's grade.
So you can individually change, so like, for example, if there's only one student, Schoology will allow one student to have certain things.
So yeah.
It'll show that visually for them as well?
Yeah, so either by omitting assessments or excusing assessments. I've got 2 or 3 different ways that are in the written detail. I'm not gonna get into that level of detail today, but yes. So there's a lot more customization of what goes into a student's grade. I can have an assignment or a reassessment that I'm only reassessing a handful of kids. That's fine, I don't have to reassess or put that assignment in for every student. Okay, so a lot more ability to drill down for individual kids. So essentially there are 5 possible scenarios, and these are on your desk for next year. And these are the 5 ways that student learning next year can go into the grade book. Some of you may be really used to right now to being able to create some custom rubrics. You will not have that option next year, all right? So the rubric in Schoology next year will be standardized to the general academic scale. That's important to note. But essentially 5 scenarios. The first scenario is it's gonna hit the grade book. It's gonna count towards a student's proficiency level. And every time that happens, it must use the full general academic scale. And so I think we talked a while back before is that I don't have a way in Schoology for it to go into the grade book, and Schoology only know, oh, a student could only get exhibiting on this assignment. Every assignment that goes into the grade book that is going to count towards the student's grade must have emerging, developing, exhibiting, and exhibiting depth. That's really important to know. Because if you say, oh, you can only get up to emerging, when Schoology is mathematically calculating the grade in the background, Schoology still assumes that that student could have gotten exhibiting depth. So you have to use the full general academic scale. Okay. Scenario 2 is essentially I can put in an assignment or a discussion that uses only part of the general academic scale. I'm going to give feedback to students, but it's not going to show up in the calculation of that student's overall proficiency level. Okay. It's really important to know, a lot of you may be using Schoology quizzes right now. Schoology quizzes do not work for scenario 1 or 2. So if you're using Schoology quizzes right now, Carrie, myself, Daniel can talk to you about what can be done and what workaround exists. But right now you need to know that if it's going to hit the grade book, it can't just be a Schoology quiz. If you want to give a Schoology quiz, you can give it for completion only, so that essentially the student completed it, or the student essentially needs to reassess on that quiz. So you can still use Schoology quizzes, but if it's going to go into the grade book, we need to talk about how you want to do that and work together on that. Scenario 4 is approaches to learning. You do not have to use Schoology for approaches to learning, but you do need 2 to 4 pieces of evidence per semester for approaches to learning, and that will go into PowerSchool. So we're still going to report
Can
on
you say
approaches
that
to
again?
learning. Yep. You do not have to put approaches to learning assessments into Schoology. You need 2 to 4 pieces of evidence each semester for how you're going to mark a student's approaches to learning on the gradebook, whether that's rarely, consistently, rarely. And so, is that a shift for next year?
No, and evidence could be, it's like, so if you're giving my daughter Olivia proficiency in motivation, you came to that decision somehow. Either it was through her self-reflection, your reflection of the rubric, an assignment. There needs to be evidence somewhere of why you gave that particular grade. You can formally put it in the gradebook as an ATL category, much like we have done in the past with our gradebooks. Or if you want it to be much more fluid and loose, it doesn't have to be in the gradebook, but at the end of the day, in conferences, you need to be able to speak to why you gave the child a seldom or a consistent learning consistent. So that's what we mean by evidence. It's just something you can speak to if someone asks.
We say 2 to 4 now, which seems like that's new. Do we mean per ATL?
No, just the big.
No, the big in general. You can do all 3 ATLs one time in the student reflection piece, by all means. All right, and then for those of you who teach, for example, specs or health or religious education and are not making the transition to standards-based learning next year, the default scale will still be available in Schoology, much as you would use it now. All right, so it will be updated to include a B- and a C+, but for those of you who are not making this transition for next year, for some of your courses, Scenario 5 is default scale. So if your course is making this transition, your options are scenarios 1 to 4. If your course is not making this transition, your option is scenario 5. Okay? So what matters next year in Schoology is this idea of what we call alignment. And so when I want something to count towards the grade, when I am using scenario 1, this is going to hit the student's grade, you have to align it to the measurement topics that you are assessing. All right, so you choose the measurement topics for that assignment, and what that eventually does is it's going to produce a rubric that looks like this. This rubric is not customizable in Schoology. So that is a big shift from your current gradebook that has a customizable rubric. This rubric is not customizable, okay? So I'm going to talk in a little bit about how you work around that in putting your rubric in for the assignment. But essentially when you put grades into the gradebook next year, this is what it'll look like. It'll have the reporting category with the measurement topic, and you will choose, did the student get exhibiting, depth, exhibiting, developing, or merging. You will see points, students will not see points, all right? So points is just the mathematical calculation happening in the background. Yes?
So does that mean, for example, it won't say measurement topic 1?
No.
It will say analyzing themes.
Yes.
But then for the course and the course team, there would be a master rubric that would be like pinned at the top of a Schoology, or like
Exactly.
that's where the student would look to
Yes.
know a more paragraph-like description of exhibiting.
Yes, I embed it into when I create the assignment in Schoology, and I'm gonna show what that looks like.
Okay.
Okay. So I know that's a big shift for some of you, is that next year your rubric is not customizable. For when I'm using the partial general academic scale to give feedback, I leave it unaligned. So in other words, I don't choose my measurement topics. That's what keeps it from hitting the grade book, is I don't align it there at the bottom. And you have a different Schoology rubric that says general academic scale, not for rubric, all right? And so that is going to allow you to give the student feedback using the general academic scale. But if I'm giving an assessment and it only goes up to exhibiting, I would use this, all right? So I can still then mark the student's work as exhibiting, but it's not going to hit the grade book, all right? So this is an option for formative feedback.
Sarah, can I have a question there?
So one of the questions, thank you, Mike, for asking this question that relates to formative work or formative learning, is given that there's two types of formative now, right? Formative that will feed the proficiency average and formative work that will not. As teachers, are you going to have to answer the question, does this count for a grade?
Yeah.
And so it's the language that we really want to start using with kids, right? This is formative learning. It's going to inform you. It's going to inform me. And in this particular case, this piece of information will be part of your proficiency for reading, for writing, for modeling. Or in this particular case, it will inform you, will inform me, but it will not be part of your total proficiency in your grade book. So we want to start changing the language with kids about, does it count? Well, it all counts. It's all evidence of learning. Even if it's not part of the proficiency calculation, it's still information for you as a teacher. And you could decide later on that, oh, I actually want to use that bit of information. So it's really, I hope it's going to shift the way kids think, and that kids will actually be encouraged and want to do the formative learning. And I imagine that much of our formative learning will turn into process work. We'll talk about artificial intelligence in the fall, though, and some of our struggles with that. But the more process work we give kids, it's informing them, it's informing us, and yes, it's part of your learning. And so, Mike, where are you? So yes, it counts, but I feel like I want to try to shift that, make that a non-vocabulary word in the school. Does that help?
There's also a question about if we can't use the Schoology test and quiz, but we have to if I want to use Lockdown Browser. So I can still give a quiz or a test in Schoology, but I'm going to have to essentially create a parallel assignment to put the grade in on the rubric. So I can give a quiz. I can set my grade boundaries for that quiz, but I'm going to have to take the data and manually enter it into a parallel assignment on Schoology that allows me to enter it on this rubric. I can't set my Schoology quiz so that I can grade on this rubric. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. So that's the workaround. Yep. All right. So what counts for grading, to use that word? Anything that I put into the gradebook has to be, again, that's scenario one. I have to align it to the measurement topics in Schoology. If it's formative and it doesn't contribute to the overall proficiency level that a student is seeing, then I can use scenario 2 or scenario 3. All right, so that's kind of my ways of putting information into the gradebook. So we're going to take a moment and pause here. I have 5 different assignments, and so at your table, I would like you to, using the sheets on your table, decide, based on this assignment that I want to give, which scenario would I use? So we're going to take about 5 minutes to discuss that, and then we'll come back together. Make an important clarification. You can still give quizzes next year. Just clarify, you can give quizzes. All right, you can still give quizzes. It's just how you use Schoology quizzes if you're giving that quiz in Schoology. So if you're giving a pencil, paper quiz, no problem. It's the Schoology quiz function and how it hits the gradebook. So I just want to clarify that in case you were starting to think that we can't give quizzes anymore. Yes?
I was just gonna say, if you were giving that Schoology quiz and one of the questions in it or two has an exhibiting depth nature to that question, it won't automatically go into your gradebook, but then you can manually create a level.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yes. I can create a parallel assignment, essentially. Okay. Yes.
If you use the Schoology quiz and you put in your grade level, blah, 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 where will the students see their score?
I am going to get to that, so hold on tight. All right. Okay, so assignment A, by show of fingers, is this scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Let's just see a show of fingers. All right, it is scenario 3. Good job. All right. Assignment B, is it scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? 4. Okay, thank you. I'm so glad that we gave the answer 4. Thank you. All right, assignment C. All right, this one is a trick question because it could be 2. It could be 3. And honestly, it actually could be 4 as well. So all of those are viable options there. My apologies, I will fix the slides before middle school comes in to include 4. Thanks. All right, assignment D. What is assignment D? 1 and 4, great. All right, I'm glad that we got both of those there. So what that means is that you have to double enter that assignment into the gradebook. Currently, in Schoology, I can create a custom rubric that allows me to have, for example, a 4-point rubric like A, B, C, D, and a 3-point rubric for approaches to learning. New Schoology Mastery Gradebook does not allow for that. So this would have to be entered as a, double entered into the gradebook. Okay, so just so we're aware, it have to be 2 separate columns. Yeah.
Is an ATL still a general academic skill thing?
No, the ATL scale is consistently, inconsistently, and seldom.
For now. So yeah.
For now, for next year.
So can that be built into the gradebook for all of us?
It will be into the gradebook. You would have to choose the ATL scale. Yes, it will be. You will have in the gradebook a rubric called Approaches to Learning, and it will be on the 3-point scale. Seth.
So you want us to put the ATLs into Schoology next year?
It is optional. It is an option. But what Carrie was sharing earlier was that for some teachers, they just do it, for example, as a student reflection right now on their learning at the quarter, at the end of the semester, and you can do that. It doesn't have to go into the gradebook. Some teachers, however, do put it into the gradebook. They find that to be an easier way of just tracking those points with kids and being able to easily find all of the information in one place. So it's optional.
Do you think it's the best practice?
I believe in being clear with kids about their learning. So if I was a teacher, I would probably put it into Schoology so that they are aware, so that their parents are aware. But that's my personal philosophy about I want to be as transparent as I can with kids. I don't want it to be a surprise on the report card.
The reason we're being more flexible with this next year is there's future work to be done around approaches to learning and aligning that R1 through 12. And so that work hasn't been done yet. So rather than change how we do things in everything, we're just trying to keep that part a little simpler. And I think Faye had said in the next couple of years that will be part of our future work. So continue as you feel comfortable with ATLs.
You mentioned something earlier when Alice was talking about maybe moving to a different scale for that, or a different language on the scale. Because right now, if we address an individual assignment and we try to say that you did something consistently, inconsistently, or seldom on that one point, it's a little bit square peg round hole. Like, it might be hard to, like, if we were putting it into Schoology, it might be hard to, like, show the kid, you seldomly did this thing the one time you did it, on like on a
I
data
agree,
point, right?
yes, I agree with you, yep, yeah, I agree. Belinda?
In the scale, do we still have completion there?
Yes, so you will still have a completion rubric next year. It is completed, it is partially complete and incomplete.
This can also use as ATL for, so we don't have to do it ATL.
You could do it that way as well, yes.
But you also, I think you also mentioned like we can create two assignment for one work.
Yes.
So one specific for scenario one and the other one for scenario 5. We don't have to.
No, you don't have to.
We can decide within the team.
Yep, but Schoology literally, like, the functionality will not let you put two rubrics. Yes, yep. All right, someone asked a question about whether or not the measurement topics will be loaded into Schoology for you. The answer is yes, that will all be loaded over the course of this summer. And can you make a decision after you've done some formative work and you've aligned it, can you unalign it? Yes, you can unalign it. You could also decide later on that you want to align it and then formally assess the students on it. So there is that flexibility there. Okay.
Sorry, Terry, do you have any perspective in terms of teachers switching things to suddenly align it like a month later or whatever?
Yes, great question. We don't want to surprise our kids. So I would imagine that this would be at the individual level. You have a student in front of you, and Johnny, for some reason, got really sick, and he was out, and I'm looking at all his formative work that wasn't aligned, meaning that it's not going into the graded, the proficiency average, and I want to use that as evidence. So I could sit with Johnny, let's look at that formative work, and let's move some of it over to the aligned part, so that's contributing. You can't do that. Okay, that's good to know. So, but I think Todd brings up a good point in that you don't want to say something is not aligned and then go, oh, sorry, I'm aligning it. Like, that's not fair either. We want to be transparent with kids. So Sarah, if that was that scenario though, what can I do with Johnny I can create other assignments, right? And put them in again and align them. I just have to do a little bit of extra legwork.
I think it would be important in that case then to clearly like document or communicate so that the student, the parent, you, if something comes up later, aren't caught off guard by that.
Yeah, and there's a really great feature in Schoology, when we have it now, the comment feature, right? And that's a great place to put those kinds of things if you're doing things for kids. This also came up in the math department. I think, Simone, when we were having lunch one day with some of the math team, is I think when we're making decisions like that, it's just good to check in with your team and say, hey, this is what I'm doing for this kid. Does it feel okay? Is that consistent? Because we're in this together, and we want to make sure that there's multiple voices. Even checking in with me, or Annalie, or Amy next year, I think are also good practices as we learn how best to use this for kids. It's about the kid. So we should advantage the kid where we can, if it's appropriate.
I think also taking something that was not aligned and then becomes aligned is kind of a violation of the academic handbook, where we've said that we would tell them a certain amount of time ahead of time whether they're going to have what we now call summative. And so saying, like, surprise, that was actually summative, is like a backdoor pop quiz kind of thing. That we do like, no, oh my gosh. So I think those kind of things we have to be really careful about.
I would be much more likely to like unalign something later than I would be to align something later. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add also is that next year, during our faculty collapse, there will be time to continue this work, and so there's going to be scenarios that are coming up that you guys as a team will be sitting down and talking through some of these. I think that Carrie's advice of, like I said, checking in with your team ahead of time, it just sets everybody up in a more healthier work environment, and also it keeps all the students and parents and everybody on the same page. So just know that as scenarios come up, there will be scenarios. Like, these guys have done a really great job of trying to working through all of it, but there will be things that will come up that we didn't see, and that there's time set aside for that to happen next year, to work through that and to help make sure that we're cleaning that up along the way.
Thank you. All right, and then, so, drawing us back, assignment E, I hope that we all feel fairly confident that that's scenario one, that that's very summative, okay? All right, so now, questions about rubrics and comments and where students going to see some of their quizzes and other pieces of work that they provide. So the first question is, if I have a task-specific rubric and I want more detail than what you see up in this upper right-hand corner, you can embed that into the assignment when you create the assignment, all right? So this is a Google Doc that has been embedded into the description of the assignment so that kids can see the rubric there, all right? So that's goes into Schoology. So when you create an assignment in Schoology, there's a big box that has a description. You can put text into it. You can also copy a rubric into it. And so this is so far what we found to be the most effective way of using a task-specific rubric attached to the assignment. Yes?
So you had said that we weren't able to alter.
I can't.
So is it, so it's just the top one that?
I can't alter this top one. This one you can definitely alter, yep.
That's just for describing the assignment, but that wouldn't give individual student feedback. Like,
Correct.
Not highlighting those levels for each individual.
Correct, yeah, it's just in there as like a snapshot or an embedded link.
So if you wanted to tell them which categories they were, which scores, that would be.
You can do it up top and they can refer back, or you can do it on an individual rubric and attach it to the assignment. When kids are submitting work via Google Docs, a way that I have found to be effective is to have kids always attach the rubric at the end of their Google Doc so that I can highlight it or annotate it. That way you don't have to upload a rubric for every kid. So when a kid turns in their Google Doc or their Google slide presentation, I would make sure the last page, or I would train my students to make sure the last page or the last slide is the rubric so that I can annotate it on that student's document and that it's all in one big piece. Because I know that for me in the classroom, I didn't have time to upload a rubric for every kid. So I just had the kid add it to the end of their assignment.
They can also self-assess on it, so that's.
Yes.
Yeah, you're accumulating.
Yep, great. Yes. All right, so that's my rubric workaround. Common assessments for course teams. If you are teaching a course with other colleagues, you should have some common formatives during the unit. That's a part of the new assessment grading and reporting guidelines. So if we're teaching a unit together, that doesn't mean the instruction needs to look the same every day. It doesn't mean every formative we need to give is the same, but there should be a couple of common formatives during the unit so that we can have common data points to have conversations about instruction and how students are doing. So I think most of you do this already. This is newer in the middle school, so I'm just pointing that out here. Course teams must use the same rubric. I'm pretty sure in the high school you all do. Again, that's something different in the middle school, so that's more for their information. But just so we're clear, if you are teaching the same course, you should be using the same rubric. And you should be calibrating on summative assessments together. Again, that is something I know is already a very common practice. Comments. So some of you asked, well, where do students see the quiz grade? Where do students see comments? So at least for next year in Schoology, students will see the Mastery Gradebook. They will also still see the same tab that they do now called Grades. And when they go there, what will happen next year is when you use the General Academic Scale, this little green note will pop up that says See Mastery Gradebook. So they won't see 3 out of 5 there or 12 out of 15. It'll say See the Mastery Gradebook for your score on the assignment. Because it's a rubric, I can't put the rubric here. And they will also see comments there. So this is where they see comments. whether it's completion scale, whether it's a quiz, all of that information also shows up in the traditional grade book. So anything that's not counting the student's grade, it's going to show up in the same grades section that they look in now to find out their grades. Okay. Again, I understand that that may not be ideal to have to look in both places. It's just the nature of the system. And then just a reminder that when I have a measurement topic, the way that Schoology calculates the proficiency level is a straight average. So within a measurement topic, all of my assignments are weighted equally. All assessments count equally, whether it's formative, whether it's summative. If it hits the grade book, the 20-minute pencil on paper quiz counts just as much as the 8-week assignment project, all right? So that's important to know. That's how Schoology is gonna calculate the student's overall proficiency level. Schoology does that same thing for a reporting category. And so when it calculates the proficiency level for a reporting category, it takes all of the measurement topics. So if there are 3 measurement topics, each of them weigh 33%. All right, there is not a way in Schoology to be able to change that so that a measurement topic is 50%, 25%, and 25%. It also doesn't matter if in one measurement topic you have 12 assignments and in one measurement topic you have 2 assignments. Schoology is going to weight them equally. Graham?
There are an even number of assessments for a measurement topic and the student achieve equally. So say 2 developing and 2 exhibiting. Will they get exhibiting or developing as average?
Exhibiting.
Okay.
So just so you know, the way, if this is super interesting to you, we have to set a number in the background of Schoology. And so if you're dying to know that number, here it is. 3.5 to 4 is exhibiting depth. 2.5 to 3.49 forever repeating is exhibiting. 1.5 to 2.49 forever repeating is developing. 0.1 to 1.49 forever repeating is emerging, and 0 is insufficient evidence. So I'm going to talk about insufficient evidence in a moment. That gets you really excited. But Schoology is just averaging grades, okay? That's what it does. You will be able to, in like 2 slides from now, omit student learning, and I'm going to talk about that. Yes?
Yes, since there's a lot of changes on Schoology, so I'm wondering will the students be given orientation on viewing and interpreting the information from Schoology and eventually understand their own progress?
Yes. Further details to be announced. But yes, it is, because this is new for most students, we are, before the end of this year, we will have that plan. It is on our to-do list. Hopefully we will be able to do that with a consistent person giving that message so that 8 teachers aren't giving 8 different how-to messages, right? Like, so, and we don't want a kid to have to hear it 8 different times. So, details to come. Yes. Okay, Eric.
Is it possible within my group, if we decide one of our assessments really was a lot more serious than the others, to put it in twice? Or 3 times? Or 4 times?
So, my doctoral degree is not in gradebook hacking, but I'm really good at it. I think that that's like a good discussion to have with your team, your department. If you're going to do something like that, always letting Carrie and Anna Lee know is helpful. So that's how I answer that question. But yes, I do know really good gradebook math hacks if you're interested. That is one of them. All right. Dave.
Sorry, one thing with that. I was just saying, remember, the kids and parents all see this.
Yep.
And so if it looks super weird, we gotta decide, we have to talk about why it looks super weird, right? So it's just something to be aware of, for sure. So if it's something that you want to do, thinking about how it's named or how the assessment is split up, possibly. But I think that being mindful of that would be important.
There was a question, and I think I may have addressed it, but again, I just want to say, I know that Schoology right now, you see numbers. Next year, students should not see numbers. That is a system-wide thing that we are able to turn off in the Mastery Gradebook. Students should not see numbers next year. Which brings me to a comment. I may or may not have a slide. I cannot remember at this point. Next year on rubrics, oh, I do, but it was back here. I forgot the most important part of this slide, which was rubric should not include any letter grades or numbers. Right now, your rubric may have exhibiting depth A, exhibiting B. Next year, those letter grades should not be on any rubric. It also should not be a rubric that says 4, 3, 2, 1. It should be a rubric that says exhibiting depth, exhibiting, developing, emerging. No additions, no takeaways. Yes?
Right now, school is turned into whatever you put into numbers, 4, 2, 2.
Yes, it does it in the background. That's how it averages. Students should not be able to see that number next year. Kids will eventually figure out there are numbers in the background. Don't get me wrong, they'll know it. But we're shifting the discussion from how do I get an A to what do I need to do better in this category. And that requires all of us having consistent conversations with kids, and that requires us taking away the numbers. Yeah, Alice.
What do our transcripts for colleges show? The GPA?
Shows the letter grade and the GPA.
So they translate our exhibiting depth, all of that into letter grade?
And we're gonna talk about how we do that. Yep. For now. Okay. Omitting student learning. So we've talked a lot about, and the idea of the philosophy of standards-based learning is most recent, most consistent, right? I want to honor students' most recent learning, and so that means that I omit early learning in Schoology. There are about 3 or 4 different ways to do this. So I'm not going to get into detail about this today. It's in the Schoology documents, and we can talk about it more in the fall. But that is, for those of you who are concerned about the straight average, you have the ability to omit from the grade early learning so that it does not calculate into the student's grade. That's also really important with reassessment. And again, there are multiple ways to do that. And so we'll talk about it more in the fall, but it will happen. Reassessment, speaking of, whenever possible, reassessment should go into Schoology as a separate assignment. Okay, there are quite a few reasons for that, but a primary one being just a continued documentation of student learning. We don't want to lose the documentation of that student's learning. So reassessment should go in as a separate column when possible.
Does the Schoology allow that to be separate for each student?
So you can put in an assignment. I don't have to grade every student on that assignment. So yes, in that way it allows it to be separate for each student. You also in Schoology, when you have your rubric, if I'm reassessing 3 measurement topics, I don't have to grade a student on all 3 measurement topics. I can grade a student on 1 row of the rubric, and Schoology will accept that as valid. Okay, so when I have this picture here, if I'm reassessing a student, I can have all of these categories in here. I don't have to select them. I may only select the one that's relevant to that student for the reassessment. So I don't have to fill in a grade for every student, okay? I'm mindful of my time and that I have like 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get through what I can with, again, the note that more is coming in the fall. All right, oh, I only had to go 1 slide forward. Insufficient evidence. Next year on the report card, or I'm sorry, on the rubric, there will be a 5th column called insufficient evidence. But the gradebook is live in Schoology right now with AP Lang, so I can't make changes to the gradebook to show you what it will look like. But just know it will read exhibiting depth, exhibiting, developing, emerging, insufficient evidence. It should only be used when students aren't handing work in within the 8-day cycle. And again, we'll talk more about this in the fall. It hits the student's grade as a 0. So it knocks the grade. It's designed to be temporary. By the end of the semester, I really shouldn't be sitting with any insufficient evidences. When a student hands an assignment in, at that point, the assignment should reflect the learning, okay? If a student doesn't turn the assignment in with 8 days, different discussion. All right, there's a behavioral component to that, and we'll talk more about that, but essentially it'll be incomplete in Schoology, so that it's not negatively impacting the student's grade. But like you, having been a high school teacher, there are times a kid doesn't turn something in and I need some motivation, and so putting in insufficient evidence is going to hit their grade in the class. It should knock it down a bit, and for most kids that is a motivator, okay? So, all right, final set of information here in my, if you're an AP teacher, this is so important. Some of you are thinking, how do I get my multiple choice tests into Schoology? I'm happy to talk more about it in the fall. But essentially, when you're setting up grade boundaries for a student, this is how we're going to talk about those grade boundaries. So for example, AP Calculus, it used to be a long time ago that essentially you needed about 50% of the questions right to get a 4 or 5. You need about 50% of the points back in the day. Not 90% of the points. And so that leads us, we have to set some grade bounds. I'm happy to help work on that with you for your course. But when we're thinking about a student's performance in the correlation to the AP exam, this is what we're going to use. It does not mean if a student gets an exhibiting depth in your course, they're going to get a 4 or 5 on the AP exam. I know that because a lot of things happen on test day. But when you're thinking about how you're assessing students and how you should put their work into the general academic scale, this is a guideline for all of us to use so that we're consistent, so that in AP Lang, exhibiting depth is a 4 and 5, and in AP Calc, exhibiting depth is a 4 or a 5, or that level of work required. Translation scale. So you'll remember from the fall, we spent a lot of time talking about this. Carrie has sent out the final scale. This is going to be a process that happens in PowerSchool. All right. So again, more details to come, but this is how we get from the student's proficiency levels on reporting categories to the grade that goes onto the transcript. And as you're well aware, next year there will be a new report card. You've seen some previews of it at different times earlier in the year. But essentially the report card will show the reporting categories with the proficiency level. And then at the end, it will have a letter grade. And that letter grade is calculated according to the scale. Yes.
Just to add something, and maybe Alice, this goes to what you were asking. So teachers are no longer in the business of giving letter grades. We are freeing you from that. You will only communicate learning in proficiency levels. So in the fall, we'll talk more about that. It's really important that when you're in Schoology and you're looking at your reporting categories and you're looking at the proficiency levels, those need to be accurate. Because once those go into PowerSchool, the school gives the letter grade for the transcript purposes for now. Future discussion with the school about whether we continue with letter grades, but we are committed until 2025. So I hope that's freeing in some senses. That's why we don't want to talk in letter grades anymore. But your proficiencies have to be accurate because PowerSchool is using these combinations to determine what that letter grade is. Thanks. All right, Daniel, where can we learn more?
Oh, sorry, I didn't
It's
realize I was
you.
speaking.
So inside the Schoology user guide, which has been developed and shared with you all, there is a table which has step-by-step guides and also overviews which include summary of the information from the Schoology user guide, trying not to say agreement, user guide, and there's also linked to YouTube videos, step-by-step guides, and everything in between. We'll also be doing some sessions this week and next. The first session is tomorrow at lunchtime in the TLC. If you'd like to walk through and click through the system, we can allow you to do that. Currently, because we're running school in session, we can't allow everyone to have access to the new mastery, so you can click through yourselves. But the idea is when we do orientation next year, everyone have that opportunity. We want to make sure that those materials are available for you if you want to dive into it before the start of the school year. Yes?
I know that in the past, the lessons, the first week we're coming back to school, the first week we're back here, rather than the kids, is when our new classes come online. Is that going to be the same limit, or are they going to kind of like be in school a little earlier so we can kind of poke around with that?
I believe as soon as possible, they're going to roll that over.
Yeah, so we've created a timeline of all of the things that have to happen, and so I've asked for August 1st. That's the goal, but there's a lot of things happening, but crossing our fingers for August 1st.
Quick question, is all of our previous courses still gonna be accessible through the archive on
Yes.
Schoology? Yeah.
Yep, and all of your previous grades will still be in there, they're not going to be removed. Even though we're cleaning up the scales, the grades will still sit there, they sit within the courses. I'll
Yeah.
double check that.
We are going to clean up rubrics this summer. So there are a lot of rubrics in Schoology right now, and because of the changes for next year, those rubrics will be cleaned up and you will see significantly fewer rubric options, 4 or 5 to be exact, for next year.
Will those be in history accessible somehow?
No.
So we should.
So they'll be attached to your old assessments in your old courses. You'll be able to see how you graded them, but you won't be able to use them at all. And you cannot create your own.
But we'll be able to see what was used in case we need to transfer it to a different type of document.
Correct. Yep.
All right, so that's it. I know that's been a lot of information. I am around for the next half hour or so, but what we're asking you all in here, if you want to stay and ask questions, but what we're asking as we transition into the next portion of the afternoon is in the presentation on the last slide, there's a Google form. And so your department is going to go back and convene a meeting. And we're gonna ask you to complete the Google form. You can do it individually or you can do it as a department. It's up to you. The one required question is really about additional support and training required for next year. And so what is it that you still need or want to know that as we begin to plan for orientation and welcoming back week, what is it that we can prepare for, and also how then next August, September, October, can we be offering sessions or videos that help meet those needs as well? So we know that it's change. Change is hard. It's a learning for all of us, but we really are committed to providing as much support for this as we can. And as you have questions about how does this work, please let me know, please let Daniel know, because we are here to support you, okay? So that is 2 minutes early. Thank you all for a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you back here at 3:30 for snacks and celebration.